I never thought I would become the kind of person who goes to war with a homeowner association. But here I am, standing in my driveway at 6 in the morning, staring at a bright orange violation notice stapled to my fence, while 3 feet of fresh Colorado snow blankets everything in sight. My name is Lucas Henderson, and I have lived in the Pinewood Springs community just outside Denver for exactly 8 months. When my wife Sarah and I bought this house last April, the real estate agent barely mentioned the HOA. She waved it off as a formality, something that just handled the shared amenities and kept the neighborhood looking nice. What she failed to mention was that the HOA board was run by a tyrannical woman named Barbara Kensington, who treated every minor infraction like a federal crime. The notice flapping in the cold wind read that I was being fined $500 for failure to maintain property standards and excessive snow accumulation on visible areas. I had to read it 3 times before the absurdity really sank in. We had just gotten hit by one of the worst February snowstorms in a decade. The entire state was buried. Emergency services were stretched thin, schools were closed, and the governor had declared a state of emergency. But apparently, Barbara and her merry band of HOA board members expected me to have my driveway and yard completely cleared within 24 hours of the storm ending. I trudged back inside, my boots leaving wet prints on the entryway tile. Sarah was making coffee in the kitchen, still in her pajamas. She worked from home as a graphic designer, and the storm had given her a legitimate excuse to stay in comfortable clothes all day. "You look angry," she said, glancing up from her phone. "What happened?" I tossed the notice onto the kitchen counter. She picked it up, her eyes scanning the text. I watched her expression shift from curiosity to confusion to outrage in the span of about 10 seconds. $500. Are they insane? Half the neighborhood is still snowed in. The Johnsons cannot even get their car out of their garage and they are fining us. Apparently so, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. And it gets better. If I do not clear the snow within 48 hours, they are adding another $250 per day until I comply. Sarah set the notice down and pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "I'm looking up the HOA bylaws right now. This cannot be legal." I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling the exhaustion of the situation settling into my bones. This was not the first issue we had faced with the Pinewood Springs HOA. In September, they had cited us for having our trash cans visible from the street, even though trash day was literally the next morning. In November, Barbara herself had shown up at our door to inform us that our Halloween decorations were still up on November 2nd, which violated the seasonal decoration policy. Never mind that we had both been dealing with a family emergency and had flown to Ohio to help my parents. The decorations had earned us a $100 fine. "Here it is," Sarah said, reading from her phone. "Snow removal is expected within a reasonable time frame following winter weather events. Residents are responsible for clearing walkways, driveways, and visible yard areas." That's so vague it's meaningless. What's reasonable? And how are we supposed to clear 3 feet of snow from our entire yard? "Barbara defines reasonable," I muttered. "And apparently reasonable means 24 hours, even during a state of emergency." Sarah slammed her phone down on the counter. "This is harassment. We need to fight this." I wanted to fight it. Every fiber of my being wanted to march over to Barbara's house and tell her exactly what I thought of her petty power trip, but I also knew how these things went. The HOA had money, lawyers, and time. They could drag this out for months, racking up fines and legal fees. We had already spent a small fortune renovating the kitchen when we moved in. Our budget was tight. "Let me try to handle it diplomatically first," I said. I will clear what I can and then request a meeting with the board to discuss the fine." Sarah looked skeptical but nodded. "Fine. But if they do not back down, we are getting a lawyer." I spent the rest of the morning outside with my snow shovel, clearing the driveway and the front walkway. The work was backbreaking. The snow was heavy and wet, the kind that makes your shoulders scream after the first dozen scoops. By noon, I had managed to clear a path from our front door to the street and had made a decent dent in the driveway. But the yard was another story. We had a quarter-acre lot and it was completely buried. Clearing it all would take days of work, assuming I did not have a heart attack first. I was taking a break, leaning on my shovel and trying to catch my breath, when a black Lexus SUV pulled up in front of my house. I knew that car. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that car. Barbara Kensington climbed out, wrapped in an expensive-looking wool coat and wearing boots that had probably never seen real snow before today. "Mr. Henderson," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone of false pleasantness that made my teeth clench. "I see you received our notice." "I did," I said, keeping my voice even. "I am working on clearing the snow now, as you can see." Barbara surveyed my progress with a critical eye, her lips pursed. She was in her early 50s, with precisely styled blonde hair and the kind of sharp features that seemed designed for looking down at people. "Yes, I can see that. However, the notice specified all visible areas of the property. Your yard is still completely covered. Barbara, we got 3 feet of snow in less than 24 hours. The entire state is under a state of emergency. I am doing the best I can. The HOA bylaws are quite clear, Mr. Henderson. Property standards must be maintained regardless of weather conditions. Other residents have managed to comply." I glanced around the neighborhood. Most houses still had significant snow coverage. The few that had clearer yards belonged to people I knew, had hired professional snow removal services, which cost hundreds of dollars. "Other residents have snow removal services," I said. "Not all of us have that kind of money lying around, especially after being hit with a $500 fine." Barbara's expression did not change. "That is not the HOA's concern. The rules apply equally to everyone. I suggest you prioritize compliance if you wish to avoid additional fines." "Good day, Mr. Henderson." She climbed back into her Lexus and drove off, leaving me standing in my half-cleared driveway, furious and frustrated. I went back inside, my hands shaking with anger. Sarah took one look at my face and said, "What did she do?" I told her about the conversation. By the time I finished, Sarah was pacing the kitchen, her own anger matching mine. "This is extortion," she said. "They are deliberately targeting us. I bet half the board members live in houses where they have snow removal included in their landscaping contracts. They are making rules they know some people cannot afford to follow. So, what do we do?" Sarah stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I had learned to recognize over our 5 years of marriage. It was the expression that meant she had an idea, and it was probably going to be either brilliant or get us into trouble. Sometimes both. "We play by their rules," she said slowly. "Every single rule, to the letter." "What do you mean?" "I mean we study those bylaws like they are gospel. We find every loophole, every vague phrase, every requirement, and we use them. If they want to be petty, we can be petty right back." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to just pay the fine and be done with it to avoid the conflict. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being pushed around by people like Barbara Kensington, wanted to fight back. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." We spent the rest of the afternoon combing through the HOA bylaws, which Sarah had downloaded from the community website. The document was 73 pages long and written in the kind of dense legal language that made my eyes cross. But as we read, certain things started to become clear. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a section about common areas. "The HOA is responsible for maintaining all common areas, including roads, sidewalks, and the clubhouse grounds. And it says they must maintain the same standards they require of residents." I leaned over to read the passage. "So they have to keep the clubhouse area clear of snow." "Exactly. And look at this part. It says snow and ice must be cleared from common areas within 12 hours of a weather event ending to ensure resident safety." A slow smile spread across my face. "When did the snow stop falling?" "Yesterday at 4 in the afternoon," Sarah said, checking her weather app. "Which means they were supposed to have everything cleared by 4 this morning." We pulled up Google Maps and switched to satellite view, zooming in on the Pinewood Springs clubhouse. It was located at the center of the development, a large building that housed a gym, a pool, meeting rooms, and the HOA offices. The parking lot was expansive, designed to accommodate community events. "Want to take a drive?" I asked. 20 minutes later, we were pulling into the clubhouse parking lot. Or rather, we were pulling into what would have been the parking lot if it had been cleared. Instead, it was a vast expanse of untouched snow. No plowing, no shoveling, nothing. The snow was so deep that I could barely make out the parking space lines underneath. Sarah was already taking photos with her phone, documenting everything. "This is perfect. They are violating their own rules." "Not just violating," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "They are being massive hypocrites. They fined me for not clearing my property during a state of emergency, but they have not touched their own responsibility." We drove home, and I immediately drafted an email to the HOA board, carefully documenting the violation and requesting that my fine be waived given their failure to maintain common areas. I attached Sarah's photos and cited the specific bylaw sections they were violating. I kept the tone professional and factual, even though what I really wanted to write would have required a lot more profanity. The response came the next morning. It was from Barbara, of course. "Mr. Henderson, thank you for your email. The HOA board has reviewed your concerns. However, the clubhouse parking lot is currently closed for the season due to facility maintenance, and therefore snow removal is not required at this time. Your fine stands. You now have 24 hours to clear your property before additional penalties are assessed. Regards, Barbara Kensington, HOA President." I read the email 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each pass. Sarah read it over my shoulder and let out a sound of pure frustration. "Closed for the season. That is such garbage. The gym is open." I got an email from them 2 days ago about their February fitness challenge. She was right. I pulled up the community website and there it was, a bright banner advertising the Clubhouse Gym's winter wellness program, with classes scheduled through the end of March. "They are lying," I said flatly. "They are just making up excuses." "So what now?" Sarah asked. I sat there for a long moment staring at Barbara's email. Something inside me had shifted. I was done being diplomatic. I was done being pushed around. If the HOA wanted to play games, then I would play too, but I would play to win. "I have an idea," I said, "but you are probably not going to like it." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Try me. I am going to clear my property, all of it, every single flake of snow." "Okay, that is actually responsible and not controversial at all. Why would I not like it?" "Because I am going to clear it directly onto the clubhouse parking lot." There was a long pause. Sarah stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a grin spread across her face. "That is either genius or completely insane." Probably both, I admitted. But think about it. They want my property clear. Fine, I will clear it. The bylaws do not specify where I have to put the snow, just that I have to remove it from my property. And the clubhouse parking lot is common area property. If they can leave it covered in snow, then clearly it is an acceptable place for snow to be. They are going to lose their minds, Sarah said. But she was smiling. Let them. I am following the rules. They are the ones who decided to play stupid games. The next question was logistics. I could not possibly shovel that much snow by hand, and even if I could not transport it all the way to the clubhouse. I needed equipment, heavy equipment. I called my buddy Derek, who owned a landscaping company. We had met at a community barbecue back in the summer, and he had mentioned that he did snow removal in the winter. Lucas, hey man, Derek answered on the second ring. What's up? I need to rent a snow plow or a front-end loader. Something that can move a serious amount of snow. There was a pause. This about your HOA problem. Sarah mentioned something about it when I ran into her at the grocery store. Yeah. They fined me for not clearing my property fast enough during the blizzard, even though half the state is still buried. And now they are threatening more fines. Man, HOAs are the worst. My sister dealt with one that tried to fine her for having the wrong shade of white on her mailbox. White. They wanted a different white. He sighed. Look, I would love to help you out, but renting equipment is expensive, and I am guessing you are already out $500 for the fine. Actually, I was thinking maybe we could work out a trade. You help me move this snow, and I will do your company website redesign for free. I did web design and development as a side business, and Derek had mentioned wanting to update his site. You serious? Because I have been putting that off for like 2 years because of the cost. Dead serious. I need someone with equipment and the know-how to move a lot of snow, and you need a website that was built sometime in this decade. Sound fair? More than fair, brother. When do you want to do this? Tomorrow morning. Early. Before anyone is awake, Derek laughed. Oh man, this is going to be good. I am in. I will bring the loader. Where are we taking this snow? The HOA clubhouse parking lot. There was a long silence. Then Derek burst out laughing so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You are my hero, man. I will be there at 5 a.m. This is going to be legendary. That night, I barely slept. Part of me was excited, the same kind of excited I used to feel before doing something rebellious as a teenager. But another part was anxious. What if this backfired? What if the HOA found some way to fine me even more? What if they tried to sue? Sarah must have sensed my worry because she rolled over in bed and put her hand on my shoulder. Having second thoughts, she asked quietly, a few. This is pretty extreme. It is. But they pushed you to this. You tried to be reasonable and they responded with threats and lies. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies. What if we lose? Then we lose. But at least we will have fought back. And honestly, I think you are going to win this one. Barbara might have the HOA board, but you have the moral high ground and the community on your side. People are tired of her nonsense. I thought about the Johnsons, our elderly neighbors who had been fined for having a garden gnome that was 2 inches taller than the allowed decorative item height. I thought about the Ramirez family, who had been cited for parking their work van in their own driveway overnight. I thought about all the petty, ridiculous fines and violations that Barbara had levied against people who were just trying to live their lives. You are right, I said. Let's do this. Derek showed up at 5 o'clock on the dot, driving a large front-end loader that rumbled loud enough to wake the whole neighborhood. He parked it in front of my house and hopped down from the cab, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Ready to move some snow? He asked. Let's do it. We started with the front yard. Derek using the loader to scoop up massive amounts of snow and dump it into the bucket. Once the bucket was full, he would drive the loader down the street toward the clubhouse, while I followed in my truck with the hazard lights on. It was still dark out, the streets quiet except for the rumble of the machinery. The first load took about 10 minutes to transport. We pulled into the clubhouse parking lot, and Derek positioned the loader over an empty section of the lot. With a hydraulic hiss, the bucket tilted and a cascade of snow poured out, adding to the already impressive accumulation. "One down," Derek said. "How many more you think we need?" I looked back toward my house, mentally calculating the volume of snow. "At least 20, maybe more." Good thing I brought coffee. We worked steadily for the next 3 hours. Load after load of snow made the trip from my property to the clubhouse parking lot. Derek was a professional, operating the loader with practiced efficiency. He could scoop, transport, and dump a load in under 15 minutes. As the sun started to rise, people began to emerge from their houses, starting their morning routines. A few of them stopped to watch us work, and I could see the moment they realized what we were doing. Some looked shocked. Some looked amused. One guy, Tom Chen from 2 streets over, actually came over and offered to help. "You are a legend, man," Tom said, shaking my hand. "Barbara fined me $300 because my grass was a 1/4 inch too long last summer. A 1/4 inch. I have been waiting for someone to stand up to her." "Happy to be that someone," I said. By 8 o'clock, my property was completely clear. Every inch of the yard, the driveway, the walkway, all of it was pristine. You could see the grass poking through in some places. It was probably the cleanest my property had been since we moved in, and the clubhouse parking lot. It looked like a mountain range. Massive piles of snow, some of them 8 or 9 feet tall, covered the entire area. You could not see a single parking space. The entrance to the building was almost blocked. It was beautiful. Derek shut off the loader and climbed down, surveying our work with obvious satisfaction. "That is a lot of snow. That is a compliant property and a clear violation of my HOA fine," I said. "Thanks for the help, Derek." "Thank you, man. This was the most fun I have had on a job in years. Send me the details for the website stuff when you are ready." We shook hands and Derek drove off, leaving me standing in the clubhouse parking lot as more and more people started to arrive, heading for the gym or the pool. The reactions were priceless. Confusion, amusement, anger from a few who were clearly Barbara supporters. But mostly, people seemed delighted. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in days. Sarah was waiting in the driveway, her phone in her hand. "You are trending," she said. "What?" "On the Pinewood Springs community Facebook page. Someone posted a video of you and Derek moving the snow, and it has like 200 reactions already. Everyone is talking about it." She showed me her phone. Sure enough, there was a video, clearly taken from someone's window, showing the loader dumping snow into the clubhouse parking lot. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. About time someone stood up to Barbara. "This is hilarious. Lucas Henderson for HOA president." Finally, justice for all of Barbara's ridiculous fines. There were some negative comments too, mostly from board members and their friends, but they were drowned out by the support. "Well," I said, "I guess there is no going back now." We went inside, and I made breakfast while Sarah continued monitoring social media. The story was spreading fast. Someone had created a hashtag, Justice for Lucas. Another person had started a petition to recall Barbara from the HOA board. I was halfway through my eggs when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Mr. Henderson, this is Barbara Kensington." Her voice was ice cold, each word clipped and precise. What you have done this morning is vandalism and destruction of common property. The board is holding an emergency meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock, and your presence is mandatory. If you do not attend, we will be pursuing legal action. I will be there, I said calmly. Looking forward to it. She hung up without another word. Sarah looked at me questioningly. Emergency board meeting at 2, I said. They are threatening legal action. On what grounds? You cleared your property, which is exactly what they demanded. I do not think legal grounds are Barbara's strong suit, but we should probably talk to an actual lawyer just in case. Sarah nodded and pulled up her contacts. Her cousin Rachel was an attorney in Denver, specializing in property law. Within an hour, we had a video consultation set up. Rachel listened to the whole story, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and grinned. "This is the best case I have heard all month," she said. "Okay, here is the legal reality. You did not vandalize anything. You moved snow from your private property to common property, which you have a right to use as a member of the HOA. The bylaws do not prohibit snow relocation, and they certainly do not specify where removed snow must be placed. So I am in the clear, legally. Absolutely. The HOA might try to fine you, but any fine would be unenforceable. In fact, you have a pretty solid case for harassment at this point. They fined you during a state of emergency for not clearing snow fast enough, while failing to clear their own required areas. Then they lied about the clubhouse being closed to justify their non-compliance. And now they are threatening legal action because you followed their directive in a way they did not like. What should I do at the meeting? Be calm, be factual, and document everything. Record the meeting if Colorado is a one-party consent state. Let me check." She typed on her laptop. "Yes, Colorado is one-party consent. Record the entire meeting. Do not lose your temper no matter what they say. If they fine you again, do not pay it. Let them try to enforce it, and then we will countersue for harassment and legal fees." "This could actually work," Sarah said. "It will work," Rachel said confidently. "Bullies like this HOA president rely on people being too afraid or too tired to fight back. The moment someone actually stands up to them with the law on their side, they fold. Trust me, I have seen it a dozen times." We thanked Rachel and spent the next few hours preparing. I printed out relevant sections of the bylaws, collected all the email correspondence with Barbara, and downloaded the photos of the uncleared clubhouse parking lot from before I added to it. Sarah helped me organize everything into a neat folder. At 1:30, we drove to the clubhouse. The parking lot was still completely buried in snow, though I noticed someone had shoveled a narrow path to the main entrance. A few cars were parked on the street outside, including Barbara's Lexus. The meeting room was on the second floor. When we arrived, the 5 board members were already seated at a long table. Barbara sat in the center, flanked by 2 other women and 2 men. I recognized most of them from community events. To Barbara's right was Patricia Morrison, a retired teacher who always seemed to go along with whatever Barbara wanted. To her left was Denise Carlson, who owned a real estate business and had a reputation for being ruthless. The 2 men were Harold Finch, a retired accountant, and Greg Walsh, who worked in corporate management. About 15 other residents were scattered around the room in folding chairs. I recognized Tom Chen, the Johnsons, the Ramirez family, and several others who had been on the receiving end of HOA fines. They were all watching with obvious interest. "Mr. Henderson," Barbara said coldly, "please take a seat." Sarah and I sat down in the front row. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app, making sure it was visible. Barbara's eyes narrowed when she saw it. "You are recording this meeting. Colorado is a one-party consent state," I said calmly. I am allowed to record any conversation I am part of. I assume you have no problem with transparency. A muscle twitched in Barbara's jaw, but she said nothing. Harold Finch cleared his throat. Let us begin. Mr. Henderson, you are here because of your actions this morning, specifically the unauthorized dumping of snow onto HOA common property. This is a clear violation of the bylaws regarding destruction of common property and point of order, I interrupted. What specific bylaw did I violate? I cleared my property as required by the notice I received. The bylaws do not specify where removed snow must be placed, only that it must be removed from private property. Harold looked at Barbara, who looked at Denise. Denise pulled out a copy of the bylaws and started flipping through pages. The bylaw regarding property maintenance states that residents must maintain their property in a condition that does not negatively impact common areas or other residents, Denise said. And did my snow removal negatively impact anyone? I asked. The parking lot was already impassable due to the HOA's failure to clear it. I simply added to existing snow accumulation in an area that was already non-functional. You deliberately sabotaged HOA property, Barbara snapped, her composure cracking slightly. You created a hazard and an eyesore. I created a hazard. I pulled out my folder and produced the photos Sarah had taken 2 days earlier. These photos show the clubhouse parking lot was already a hazard due to your failure to clear it within 12 hours of the storm ending, as required by Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the bylaws. You were in violation before I moved any snow. I passed copies of the photos to the board members. Patricia and Harold looked uncomfortable. Greg was frowning at the photos. Denise's expression was unreadable. Furthermore, I continued, I received a fine for not clearing my property fast enough during a state of emergency, even though I was in compliance with the vague, reasonable timeframe language in the bylaws. Meanwhile, the HOA failed to meet its own specific 12-hour deadline for common area maintenance. If I deserve a fine, then the HOA deserves a fine of equal or greater value for each day of non-compliance. That is completely different, Barbara said. The parking lot situation was due to contractor availability. According to your email, the parking lot was closed for seasonal maintenance and therefore did not require clearing, I said, pulling out a printed copy of her email. But the clubhouse gym and pool have been open and advertising events throughout the winter. So either you lied in your email, or you are lying now about contractor availability. Which is it? The room had gone very quiet. I could feel the other residents watching, some of them recording on their own phones. Barbara's face had gone red. How dare you accuse me of lying? I have served this community for 8 years. Then serve it honestly, I said. Stop selectively enforcing rules. Stop targeting residents with fines while ignoring the same violations when they are convenient for you. Either the rules apply to everyone, including the HOA, or they do not apply at all. This is outrageous, Barbara said, standing up. I will not sit here and be lectured by someone who has shown nothing but contempt for this community and its standards. I have contempt for hypocrisy, I said. I have contempt for people who abuse their power to bully others, but I have a lot of respect for this community and its residents. That is why I am here, following the process instead of just ignoring your illegal fines. Tom Chen started clapping, then Mr. Johnson joined in. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. Barbara looked around, her expression stunned. Order, she said weakly. We need order. Harold Finch leaned over and whispered something to Barbara. She listened, her face growing even redder, then nodded curtly. The board will take a short recess to discuss this matter, Harold announced. 15 minutes. The board members filed out of the room, leaving the rest of us sitting there. As soon as the door closed, people started coming up to me, shaking my hand, thanking me. "You said everything I have been wanting to say for years," Mrs. Johnson said, her eyes bright. "I got fined $400 last year for having a vegetable garden in my backyard," a woman I did not know said. My backyard. She said it violated aesthetic standards because someone could theoretically see it from the street if they walked onto my property. "Your speech was perfect." Sarah squeezed my hand. "You were amazing." "We will see," I said. "This is not over yet." The 15 minutes stretched to 30, then 45. People started getting restless. Finally, after nearly an hour, the board members returned. Barbara looked composed again, but there was something brittle in her expression. Harold cleared his throat. "After careful consideration, the board has decided to take the following actions. First, Mr. Henderson's original fine of $500 will be reduced to $50 as a symbolic acknowledgement of the unusual weather circumstances. Second, Mr. Henderson will be required to remove the snow he placed in the clubhouse parking lot within 7 days. Third, the board will review the snow removal policies to ensure clarity for future weather events. It was not a complete victory, but it was not a complete loss either. I could see Barbara seething at having to back down even that much. "I have a counter-proposal," I said. "I will remove the snow from the parking lot if the HOA agrees to clear all common areas, including the parking lot, to the same standard they require of residents. I will also agree to pay $0 in fines, since my actions were in compliance with the bylaws as written. In exchange, I will not pursue a harassment claim or seek reimbursement for the fines I have already paid this year." Harold looked at Barbara. Denise whispered something. Greg nodded slowly. Patricia looked relieved. "We need to discuss this," Harold said. "Take your time," I said. "But I should mention that I have already spoken with a property attorney, and she is very interested in this case. I would prefer to resolve this amicably, but I am prepared to proceed legally if necessary." That was the magic phrase. The board members huddled together, speaking in low voices. After a few minutes, Harold turned back to us. "The board accepts your proposal with one modification. You will remove the snow within 14 days, and the HOA will contract for professional parking lot clearing within the same time frame. All fines against you will be waived. Agreed?" "Agreed," I said. "Then this meeting is adjourned." People started filing out, many of them stopping to congratulate me. Tom Chen invited us to dinner to celebrate. Mrs. Johnson hugged Sarah. It felt like a victory, even though I knew this was probably not the end of the conflict with Barbara. As we were leaving, Barbara caught up with us in the parking lot. She was alone, her expensive coat pulled tight against the cold. "You think you won something here today," she said quietly, "but you have no idea what you have done. This community needs standards, needs rules. Without them, property values decline and chaos takes over. I'm trying to protect everyone's investment." "Then protect it fairly," I said. "Fine the people who deserve fines. Help the people who need help. Do not use the rules as a weapon because you enjoy having power over others." "I do not enjoy power," Barbara said, and for a moment she sounded almost sincere. "I enjoy order. I enjoy knowing that my home, my community, is well maintained and respectable. You may have these people fooled, but I know what you are. You are an agitator, someone who cannot follow simple rules, who has to challenge everything. People like you are why HOAs exist in the first place. People like me are why HOAs get sued," I replied. "Have a good evening, Barbara." We drove home in silence. I felt exhausted, drained by the confrontation and the adrenaline crash that followed. Sarah was quiet too, staring out the window at the snow-covered neighborhood. "You think she will give up?" Sarah asked finally. "No," I said. "Not even a little bit, but at least we won this round." Over the next few days, things settled into a strange new normal. The story of the snow incident spread beyond our community, picked up by local news outlets and even a few national websites that covered HOA horror stories. I did several phone interviews, explaining the situation and the broader issues with overzealous homeowner associations. The publicity put pressure on the Pinewood Springs HOA board. Within a week, they contracted a professional snow removal service to clear the clubhouse parking lot. I hired Derek again to help me move my contributed snow elsewhere, this time to an empty lot at the edge of the development where it could melt naturally without blocking anything. But the bigger change was in the community itself. Other residents started pushing back against questionable fines. A group formed to petition for Barbara's removal as president. People started attending board meetings, which had previously been nearly empty. At the March board meeting, over 50 residents showed up. The small meeting room was packed, with people standing in the back and sitting on the floor. The agenda included a motion to recall Barbara from the board presidency. Barbara tried to maintain her composure as resident after residents stood up to share stories of unfair fines, selective enforcement, and harassment. Mrs. Johnson talked about being fined for her garden gnome. Tom Chen described the ridiculous grass length violation. A man named Edward described being fined $200 because his house number was in the wrong font, even though the numbers had been there when he bought the house. When it came time to vote, the result was overwhelming. Of the 5 board members, only Patricia voted against the recall. Barbara was removed as president, and Harold Finch was appointed interim president until the next election. Barbara stood up, gathered her papers, and walked out of the meeting without a word. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Harold took over the meeting and immediately proposed several reforms: clearer language in the bylaws, a formal appeals process for fines, a commitment to equal enforcement of rules, including HOA responsibilities. Every proposal passed unanimously. As we were leaving the meeting, Harold pulled me aside. "I want to apologize," he said. "I should have pushed back against Barbara's tactics years ago. I told myself I was going along to keep the peace, but really I was just avoiding conflict. What you did, standing up to her, it reminded me that sometimes conflict is necessary." "Thanks, Harold. I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask if you would consider running for the board in the May election. We need people who actually care about the community, not just the rules." I glanced at Sarah, who shrugged. "It is up to you," she said. "Can I think about it?" I asked Harold. "Of course. Let me know by the end of the month." We drove home, the streetlights reflecting off the melting snow. Spring was coming, and with it the promise of a better community dynamic. "Would you actually want to be on the HOA board?" Sarah asked. "Part of me thinks it would be a chance to make real changes," I said. "But another part of me just wants to live my life without thinking about bylaws and parking lot snow removal. Those are not mutually exclusive. You could do a 2-year term, help fix things, then step down." "Maybe. Let me see how things go over the next few weeks." The next few weeks were surprisingly calm. Harold proved to be a fair and reasonable president. He responded to emails promptly, listened to concerns, and approached enforcement with common sense rather than rigid adherence to every minor rule. But then, in mid-April, things took an unexpected turn. I was working in my home office when Sarah came in, her face pale. "You need to see this," she said, handing me her phone. It was a news article from the Denver Post. The headline read, "Former HOA President Arrested for Embezzlement." I read quickly, my shock growing with each paragraph. Barbara Kensington had been arrested following an investigation into Pinewood Springs HOA finances. According to the article, she had allegedly embezzled over $75,000 over the course of 4 years, using her position as president to authorize payments to fake contractors and vendors, then funneling the money into personal accounts. "Oh my God," I said. The investigation had been triggered by Harold's review of the HOA finances after becoming interim president. He had noticed irregularities in the records, payments that did not match up with actual work performed, and had contacted authorities. My phone rang. It was Harold. "I assume you saw the news," he said, sounding tired. "Just now. I cannot believe it. $75,000, maybe more. The forensic accountants are still digging. Lucas, I need to tell you something. Some of those fake payments, they were supposedly for snow removal services. She was billing the HOA for professional clearing of common areas, but the work was never done. That is why the parking lot was never cleared. She was pocketing the money. The irony was staggering. Barbara had fined me for not clearing snow fast enough while she was literally stealing the money that should have been used to clear common areas. What happens now? I asked. Legally, that is up to the district attorney, but for the HOA, we need to rebuild trust and recover what we can. I am working with a lawyer to pursue civil action to get the money back, but it will be a long process. Is there anything I can do to help? Actually, yes. I still want you to run for the board. We need people with integrity, people who will not stand for this kind of corruption. Will you do it? I looked at Sarah, who had been listening to my side of the conversation. She nodded. "Yes," I said, "I will run." The election was in May, and I won a seat on the board by a comfortable margin. So did Tom Chen and Mrs. Johnson. The new board was younger, more diverse, and committed to transparency. One of our first actions was to revise the bylaws completely, simplifying the language and removing many of the petty restrictions that Barbara had championed. We kept the important stuff, the rules that actually protected property values and community safety. But we got rid of the nonsense about garden gnome heights and specific shades of white for mailboxes. We also implemented a new fine structure that included warnings before penalties and a clear appeals process. Fines would be reserved for serious violations, not minor aesthetic disagreements. The change in the community was remarkable. People started taking pride in the neighborhood again, not out of fear of fines, but because they wanted to. Gardens flourished. Kids played in the streets. Community events were well attended and actually fun. As for Barbara, her criminal trial was scheduled for the following year. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her lawyer was negotiating a plea deal. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, just a sense of relief that she would no longer be in a position to abuse her authority. One evening in late June, I was grilling in the backyard when Sarah came out with 2 beers. We sat on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Hard to believe it has only been 4 months since the snowstorm," Sarah said. "Feels like a lifetime ago," I agreed. "Think we would have bought the house if we knew all this was coming?" Sarah considered it. "Yeah, I think so, because it led to real change. The community is better now. People are happier. That is worth the stress. Even the part where I committed snow-based vandalism," she laughed. "Especially that part. You should have seen the look on Barbara's face when she saw that parking lot. I wish I had gotten a picture." We clinked our beer bottles together, toasting to small victories and unexpected consequences. The snow was long gone, replaced by green grass and blooming flowers. The neighborhood had transformed from a place ruled by fear and petty tyranny into an actual community. My term on the HOA board would last 2 years, and I was determined to make the most of it. Harold had announced he would not seek another term as president, and several people had approached me about running for the position. I was not sure yet if I wanted that level of responsibility, but I was open to the possibility. For now, though, I was content to grill burgers, drink beer with my wife, and enjoy the simple pleasure of living in a home where I did not have to worry about ridiculous fines or power-hungry board presidents. The legal case against Barbara eventually concluded with a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, along with restitution payments to the HOA. It was not everything we had lost, but it was something. The community moved forward. New families moved in, attracted by the improved reputation and more reasonable HOA governance. Property values actually increased, proving that you did not need draconian rules to maintain a nice neighborhood. Tom Chen and I became good friends, often getting together for basketball or just hanging out. Mrs. Johnson taught Sarah how to garden, and our backyard became a showcase of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. We even got a garden gnome, bright pink and definitely over the height limit. Nobody find us. On the anniversary of the snowstorm, someone on the community Facebook page posted a throwback photo of the clubhouse parking lot buried in snow. The comments were full of laughter and memories. The incident had become part of neighborhood lore, the story of how one person's act of creative compliance had sparked a revolution. I never set out to be a revolutionary. I just wanted to live my life without being hassled over trivial nonsense. But sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. And sometimes the right amount of snow in the right place can trigger an avalanche of change. Looking back, I would not change a thing. Not the fine, not the confrontation, not the hours of back-breaking work moving snow in the freezing cold. Because all of it led to something better, not just for me, but for everyone in Pinewood Springs. And that, in the end, is what a community should be about. Not rules for the sake of rules, not power for the sake of power, but people looking out for each other, standing up for what is right, and occasionally moving a truly impressive amount of snow when the situation calls for it. The clubhouse parking lot, by the way, is now maintained year-round by a reputable contractor that we all actually verified exists. It is always clear, always accessible, and serves as a reminder that common areas are called common for a reason. They belong to all of us, not just the people in charge. As I write this, sitting on my deck on a warm summer evening, I can hear kids playing in the street and neighbors chatting over fences. The sound of a healthy community, free from the tyranny of petty bureaucrats and corrupt officials. It all started with snow on my property, and a fine I refused to accept. It ended with a better place to live and proof that sometimes the best way to follow the rules is to follow them so literally that you expose how broken they are. Barbara taught me a valuable lesson, though probably not the one she intended. She taught me that people who obsess over controlling others are usually hiding something. She taught me that rules without reason are just tools of oppression. And she taught me that sometimes you need to be willing to cause a little chaos to create lasting change. The snow melted, spring arrived, and life went on. But the memory of that winter and the stand I took against unreasonable authority will stay with me forever. Every time I see a snowflake, I will remember the morning Derek and I moved mountains of snow, one bucket load at a time, and changed our community in the process. And if anyone ever tries to find me for something ridiculous again, well, I still have Derek's number, and I am not afraid to use it.